might be wondering how Mark Twain got all the way from the Mississippi River to California. I'm going to tell you, if I can remember. See, we disembarked from the Overland Stagecoach in Carson City in August of 1861. And back then, I have to tell you, Carson City was the most uninhabitable place on earth. Nothing grew there. Even the birds, when they flew over, carried their own provisions. In exploring the sink, we traveled down the Carson River a ways. When one is accustomed to the monstrous, mile-wide Mississippi, he grows accustomed to associating the word river with a certain degree of watery grandeur. So when one stands on the shores of the Carson, he's disappointed. Well, one of the most vigorous forms of exercise one can contrive is to run and jump across the Carson until he's overheated, and then get down and drink it dry. No, it's a moist ditch, is what it is. If it were my river, I wouldn't leave it out of doors at night. And I could see I was going to need some transportation while in Carson City, so I attended an auction and bought a genuine Mexican plug. Well, I didn't know what a genuine Mexican plug was, really, but I bought it on the advice of a man I later found out was the auctioneer's brother. Well, his tail had been chopped off, or he sat down on it wrong at one time or t'other, but anyways, he was proud of it. But this left him only his heels with which to fight off the flies. Well, with some help of some others, some holding his head and some his tail, I was able to climb onto that steed, but my feet slipped through the stirrups on the inside. So I was handcuffed at the ankles, and he knew it. So he put his feet together, all of them, in a bunch, lowered his back and fired me 5 feet into the air. And somebody shouted out, "Whoa, don't he buck?" Well, I came back down on the saddle, but the laughter this provoked, he took for applause, fired me up again. And this time I came down on the high pommel, which was too much variety for me. So I decided to get off. But now he was standing straight up on his hind legs, walking around like a member of Congress. You might think I was afraid, but I wasn't. I knew I could stay on him, so long as his ears did not pull out. Suddenly I was in the air again, and when I came down, that genuine Mexican plug was gone. So I dug myself out of the ground and made up my mind that if that auctioneer's brother's funeral was held while I was in Carson City, I would cancel all other recreations and attend it. Oh, all the talk was Esmeralda, so off we went, 6 men, a mule, a wagon, and 1,500 pounds of supplies. And after a few hours, we found we could make better time if we got out of the wagon. Ron knows that. Marie knows that. And sometime later, we found we could do better yet if we got behind the wagon and pushed it. And some folks coming back from Esmeralda, they took a look at our situation. They suggested we might do even better yet if we put the mule in the wagon. It was the coldest, bitterest winter, that winter of 61. It was so cold you could not speak the truth. Well, I know because I tried. It was so cold we carried our brandy punches around in our pockets and ate them like peanuts. Oh, the bartender just rolled them up in butcher paper and lopped them off for us. I was shoveling quartz tailings, and a mess of it struck the ledge and came down my neck and inside my clothes. Well, I didn't say a word. I climbed out of that hole and silently resolved that I'd starve before I'd ever make a target of myself again and shoot rubbish at it with a long-handled shovel. So I retired from that industry, not only with my own approval, but with the approval of those who paid the wages. they do not feel justified in paying me to shovel sand down my back. So I went off to Mono Lake, about 200 feet deep, but its waters are very sluggish with alkali. You can drag your shirt behind the boat for 5 minutes, it'll stay clean for a week. You just pound it with a rock, it gives it a nice handsome fringe around the collar. We were out pleasure cruising one day on Mono with our dog. We had a valuable dog, and he had a few raw places on him. He had more raw places than he had sound ones. He was the rawest dog I ever saw, and he jumped overboard to get away from the flies. Bad judgment. He struck out for shore with considerable interest, barking all the way, until by the time he reached the shore, there was no bark left in him, or on the outside either, for that matter. And then he took to throwing somersaults on the beach, some forwards, some backwards, and dragging himself across the sand in a sitting posture. This was not a demonstrative dog. He's rather grave-minded. I never saw him take such an interest in anything before. And then he struck out for the mountains at a gait we estimated to be 175 miles an hour. And we're looking for him yet. Now, if you pick up a starving dog and make him prosperous, he will not bite you. This is the principal difference between a dog and a man. Well, I didn't have any luck prospecting. I soon enough found out a silver mine weren't nothing but a hole in the ground with a fool at the bottom and a liar at the top. But I did one thing right. I wrote a letter to the Territorial Enterprise about my adventures in the mining fields. And on the strength of that letter, I was offered a job as a reporter. And Joe Goodman, the publisher, told me when I signed on, he said, "Sam, you have but one responsibility here. Get your facts straight. Then you can distort them as much as you like." So we never let the truth stand in the way of a good story back then, no. I learned in Virginia City a good lie can travel twice around the globe before the truth gets its boots on. But we had fun. I remember attending a ball over in Gold Hill in a ramshackle, dismal old barn of a place. It was lighted from end to end with tallow candle chandeliers made out of barrel hoops suspended from the ceiling. The grease dripped all over us. There were 200 or 300 stalwart men present, dancing with cordial energy, half of them representing women. Yes, each with a handkerchief tied around his left arm to distinguish him from the men. I was a lady myself. I wore a revolver in my belt. So did all of the other ladies. Nevada truly was battle born. 52 saloons we had in that town in my day, and no town drunk. No, we took turns. Well, I could see that this was no place for a good Presbyterian, so I didn't remain one very long. I covered the legislature for the Enterprise, and in all these years, nothing has changed. Never have I seen a body of men with tongues so handy and information so uncertain. They could talk for a week without ever getting rid of an idea. If any one of them had been on hand when the Creator was at the point of saying, "Let there be light," we never would have got it. No, the Nevada legislature meets every 2 years for 60 days, when they outrightly meet every 60 years for 2 days. When the Nevada legislature's in session, nobody is safe. Well, I might have stayed longer than my 21 months at the Enterprise and died happily there, but for a fellow by the name of Laird, James Laird, he was editor for the competition, the Daily Union. Imagine, we had 4 daily newspapers up there back then. We were larger than Los Angeles at the time. And this fellow Laird, perhaps you've known someone like him in your lifetime, he was endowed with a stupidity that with the slightest stretch would wrap 4 times around the globe and tie. And he slandered my good name in his newspaper. Well, if you must know, he called me a liar, a poltroon, and a puppy. Well, I slandered him back in the Enterprise. This went back and forth 2 or 3 days until I had to call him a coward and challenge him to a duel, which was imprudent. Oh, I wore a sidearm, yes, but that was only so as not to be conspicuous. I didn't know how to shoot one. But my friend Gillis knew how to fire. So Gillis and I went out to the appointed spot for the duel out at 6 Mile Canyon. a half hour early to practice. And Gillis was such a good shot that he took the head off a mud hen just as Laird came riding up on his pony. And Gillis was quick enough to hand me that smoking sidearm and say, "Nice shot, Sam. Don't kill him. Just shoot his nasty face off." Well, Laird heard that. He did twice around on his pony and off he went. But I was not far behind, for Governor Nye issued a warrant for my arrest for dueling, which had just been made illegal in Nevada. So I went off to San Francisco to be unemployed. Coldest winter I ever spent in my life was a summer in San Francisco. Well, in honor of Gary and Betsy visiting Red Mule Ranch and adding so much joy and warmth and music, I'd like to share with you Gary's favorite piece that I only get to use on my birthday and once in a while here at the Red Mule Ranch. It was never published. It's been pirated. It's a burlesque of a diary that Samuel Pepys kept in the time of Queen Elizabeth. So if you'll indulge me, I'll try to muddle through it here with you. If you promise not to tell anybody where you heard it. Easter night, Her Majesty the Queen foretook a fantasy, as she sometimes had, and invited to her closet certain playwrights and authors, these being Lord Bacon, His Worship Sir Walter Raleigh, Mr. Ben Jonson, and the child, Francis Beaumont, who being but 16 was still speaking his Latin tongue, having not yet learned English. In a strange mixing of truly mighty blood, the Queen also invited the meanest of sinners, to wit, the Duchess of Bilgewater, 22 years of age, the Countess of Granby, 36, her daughter, Lady Helen, 16, and two maids of honor, Lady Boothie, 65, and Lady Dilberry, having just turned 70. I, being Her Majesty's cupbearer, had no choice but to remain and hold conversation with this coarse lot. In the heat of the talk, it befell that one did break wind, yielding an exceedingly mighty and distressful fragrance, whereat all did turn toward the Queen, who stated, "Verily, in mine 68 years I have not heard a fellow fart such as this. It seemeth by the great sound and clamor of it, it must be male, and the belly that lurked behind such a deed as that must now be fallen flat against the spine of him who hath delivered so stately and so vast a bulk. Pray thee, let the author confess to the offspring. Will my Lady Dilberry testify? My God, your grace, had I room for such a thundergust within mine ancient bowels, I could not discharge the same and live to thank the Lord for it. 'Twas not I that brought forth this rich overmastering fog, this fragrant gloom. Pray ye, seek ye further. Perhaps Lady Boothie hath done the company this favor. Madam, my limbs are feeble with the weight and drouth of 65 winters, and it behooveth me to be tender unto them. In the providence of God had I contained that wonder, forsooth I'd have given the entire evening to dribbling it forth, not launching it sudden in its matchless might, taking mine own life with violence. In sooth it was not I. In God's name, who hath favored us? Has it come to pass that a fart shall fart itself? Not one such as this, I trust. Young Master Beaumont? No. No, 'twould have wafted him to heaven like so much goose down. Could it be, ye little Lady Helen? Nay, nay, thou would have to tickle thy tender maidenhead with many a mousy squeak before thou learn to blow a hurricane like this. Was it you, my learned and ingenious Johnson? Such a blast never hath mine ears saluted, nor such a stench so all-pervading and immortal. 'Twas not a novice that did it, your majesty, but one of veteran experience. In sooth, it was not I. Then there was a silence, and each did turn toward the worshipful Sir Walter Raleigh, that brown, embattled swashbuckler, who rising up did smile. Most gracious Majesty, 'twas I that did it, but indeed was so poor and frail a note compared with such as I am wont to furnish, that in sooth I was ashamed to call the weakling mine. It was nothing, less than nothing, madam, but had I come prepared, I'd have delivered something worthy. Bear with me, please your grace, till I can make amends. He then delivered himself of such a godless and rock-shivering blast that all were fain to stop their ears, and following it did come so dense and foul a fog that what came before it did seem a poor and trifling thing beside it. Then saith he, feigning that he blushed and was confused, I perceive that I am weak today, and cannot justice do unto my powers. And he sat down, as if to say, there, it is not much, but let he who hath an arse follow that. Don't tell anybody where you heard that. I think we should end this evening on an up note with some wonderful music and maybe even a song we can all sing along to. What do you think? Let's bring up old Wes and Ron and...
Hey, let's hear it from Mark Twain.
Oh, thank you, Connie. Thank you, Connie.